sometimes you have to use your marching feet, and sometimes you have to make a little noise. When I spoke at the march on Saturday, I said we need to make some noise. And sometimes we're too quiet. And sometimes you have to find a way to make a way out of no way. And sometimes you have to find a way to get in the way. Now I know some of your co-workers may be a little afraid. But you must tell them, don't be afraid. Be a good courage. We must remember that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, 1968, died in Memphis trying to help the sanitation workers. And that's what it's all about. Some people are getting richer and richer and doing better and doing better, and others are getting poor and poor. That's not right.
It's not right.
That's not fair. That's not just.
No.
So get out there, keep walking, keep marching, keep talking, keep pushing, and keep pulling. And you will have a great victory, and you can count on my help.
We're getting fed up of police brutality, of racism.
We need to eradicate systemic racism that keeps us in a cycle where we cannot succeed.
That's why on July 20th, I'm standing up.
I'm taking action on July 20th.
I will be on strike July the 20th.
Yo estoy en huelga porque nos enfrentamos a un racismo sistemático, día a día.
Our jobs, they don't care about us.
We are on the ground, on the front line, whether there's a pandemic or not.
These corporations, McDonald's, Walmart, all the fast food chains, they're all hollering for Black Lives Matter. No, they're not. They're making billions on our back. We've got people in these places dying with COVID.
Black workers are dying at a higher rate because of COVID.
I had to fight at my job just for protective equipment.
It's been 3 months, and I finally got a mask at work.
Black folk are getting gunned down.
I am an easy target as a black woman to get shot down in the streets by police.
Why should we have to be worried about if the cop is going to stop us, harass us, possibly kill us for no reason when we're not doing anything, we're just trying to live?
If things stay the same, where will we be 4 years from now?
And enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
We want for every person in our community to be able to walk safely and work safely and feel that this country is here for you.
Get out here, protest, keep fighting.
We're going to continue to unite until there's change. Because when we fight, we win.
We are all coming together today across the country to strike for Black lives because Black Lives Matter and wage justice is racial justice.
We're demanding fairness within society. We're demanding justice within society. And we're also demanding better workplace fairness.
And we want for every person in our community to be able to walk safely and work safely and feel that this country is here for you. That's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm standing up for Black Lives Matter and for the strike for Black lives.
People all around the country and all around the world are recognizing how Black lives have been systematically oppressed in a number of different ways. And through the protests that started with George Floyd, we are really starting to see people pushing for meaningful change. People are now today striking together or participating in some way with this strike in order to make sure that we see real change in our society.
Share your support on social media using the hashtag Strike for Black Lives, and you can do this all. Find out all the information by going to j20strike.org. Again, that is j20strike.org.
essential worker! Essential worker!
I'm bursting with pride to be joined by incredible activists, justice movement leaders who together are taking action today on the strike for Black lives. This is an incredible moment for our movement. We're standing together in the fights for economic and racial justice, where we understand in our bones that we are not going to win economic justice unless we join together and fight and win racial justice.
When uprisings began across this country in May in all 50 states and 18 different countries, so many corporations were quick to declare their support for Black Lives Matter. We've seen the commercials, we saw the Instagram posts, right? We saw all that. But these exact same corporations whose profits are made from the exploitation of Black workers have done very little to shift their actual policies. So corporate giants such as Walmart and McDonald's profit off of racial injustice and inequality. They claim to support Black lives, but their business models function by exploiting Black labor, passing off pennies as living wages, and pretending to be shocked when COVID-19 makes us sick. Right? Those very same people who they say matter are the essential workers who they're not supporting. They do this without consequence. Corporate power is a threat to racial justice. And the only way to usher in a new economy is by tackling those forces together until they're fully committed to dismantling racism from the inside out. So the movement for Black lives couldn't be prouder to rise in solidarity in this moment with Black workers and our allies all across the country as we strike for Black lives today. And I have no doubt that because of the legacy of this historic commitment to one another, that we're gonna win. We're gonna win, and we're gonna see our birthing of a new nation, of a new America. We will be the midwives. And so today is the next step, the next faithful step towards that. And the movement for Black lives couldn't be prouder to be one in the number.
And so I support the strike for Black lives because historically African Americans have played a major role in organized labor. And contrary to like our white brothers and sisters in organized labor, we were excluded and did not acquire the economic benefits of organized labor, right? Protective labor legislation of the 1930s, such as the Social Security Act, the National Labor Relationships Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, they did not extend to agricultural workers, right? And you got to think about during that time in 1940, almost 40% of Black workers in the South were agricultural workers. So the racism that was essentially embedded in our country, and racism then and racism now is central to the current issues like the racial wealth gap, like Black unemployment, like the prison industrial complex, and like police terror, which has brought a lot of people into the streets in this current moment. Slavery is happening right now, right? You can look at Angola, which is a prison that used to be a plantation, and see the same labor that was happening on the plantations before. What I think about is that if you are an owner of a major corporation, and you put up a Black Lives Matter Instagram post, Facebook post, whatever, send an email out to your people and you say Black Lives Matter, and you still incorporate background checks, knowing that 1 out of 3 Black men are currently on some form of parole or probation, you are boxing out those people. And what does that mean in a wage-based society? I can't buy groceries with hope. I need actual capital. I need tender. I need currency to buy groceries. So when you tell me I cannot labor in a laborless society, right? What does that produce? All right. And so essentially what equity and transformation, what we do is that we organize in the informal sector, the informal workers, which is where our people have been making lemonade out of lemons. That is the Eric Garners of our society. That is the Alton Sterlings of our society. That is the countless cis and transgender commercial sex workers in our society who are boxed out due to race, class, sexual orientation. Ableism plays a large part in that as well, right? So if you do not create in the formal economy bridges to access to economy, you cannot also then criminalize our people for doing the best they can do to survive in a wage-based society. And so we are labor. Labor history is Black history. And until all of us have access to this economy, we will be in this fight.
I've been in many different marches for Black lives since George Floyd's death. And I think there is a need to address the reality of the police brutality is way overdue. And I think we really need to address this because Systematic and structural racism and white supremacy are at the top and root of the killing of these Black people and uptick in violence against the Asian. It shows up in our community and in our workplace. It is such a shame that we're living in a 21st century in the United States is still happening. I think there's many frontline workers of colors are being most impacted the virus, but they are serving the community and saving lives. And this frontline workers shouldn't have to fight for their basic protective equipment. And that is really a shame and shock that, we have to do that. This is a basic gear for their, not only protect themselves, but to protect our community. And we really need to fight for that.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yun. You're speaking about the twin discrimination too, that the current occupant of the White House has been stirring up anti-Asian attacks that our Asian leaders and members have been experiencing since the beginning of the pandemic.
Yes,
Because,
it is.
And then you're linking that to the brutality that you witness and that you're standing against with the Black community. So thank you so much for seeing the intersection of those fights.
Jan, when I see you speak, I think like, this is who I want to be when I grow up. I see my ancestors, I'm part of the Chinese diaspora, and just seeing other AAPI leaders stand up, knowing that you're a humble leader. When I grow up, I really do want to live up to the power you've built with AAPI communities for Black lives.
Thank you. Climate
change and climate action is not possible without racial justice and racial and action for Black lives. And I do honestly, frankly, think that message has been lost a lot on very specifically big, green, white, dominant, white-led organizations in the environmental movement. And for too long, we have relied on the voices of very well-funded, well-intentioned, white-led green organizations without uplifting the frontline and fence line communities that have been fighting, living next to nuclear plants, living next to coal ash ponds, living next to natural gas compressors that poison the air and the land. And these frontline communities are oftentimes poor people and Black and brown folks. And these folks have been leading for generations on end against the fight. And only very recently did white leaders and white folks capitalize on these efforts of Black and brown leaders who have been living generational lives by coal ash ponds, nuclear plants, their lands, indigenous folks getting their lands poisoned and destroyed by capitalism and the extractive economy that we live in. And when it comes from the environmental movement, I want to make the message clear that enough is enough in the environmental movement means that we finally bring up the leadership of Black and brown folks who have been leading this fight for generations. And we become very clear in our role as white or ally-led organizations that we need to take a step back. We need to take all the resources that we've been getting and stockpiling as organizations and uplift and support the work of Black and brown leaders, leading organizations, grassroots community leaders that haven't been listened to for far too long.
Angela did a really fantastic job of naming the fact that in the past, the environmental movement, the climate movement, they have not been inclusive of Black and brown struggles and peoples, and they've made the movement about parts per million of carbon dioxide and saving the polar bears instead of, the lack of clean water access in Black and brown communities or the disproportionate rates of air pollution. And that has weakened our movement. It's shut people out, people who we desperately need to succeed. And it's made it hard for the public to understand the dangerous injustice of the environmental and climate crises that we face. But we've seen that in our society, systemic racism causes Black people to be hit first and hardest when crisis strikes. Hurricane Katrina disproportionately devastated Black communities in New Orleans, and certainly we're seeing COVID-19 similarly have a disproportionate impact nationwide. And so it's only made it clearer that the racism in this country is just claiming innocent Black lives at really alarming rates. And we know that the climate crisis is going to mean more natural disaster, going to mean more disease, going to mean more violence, going to mean more chaos. And so it's really clear that if this modern youth-led climate movement that we've seen emerge in the past year or so doesn't show up in full force for Black lives, then our collective future is going to hold this incredibly dangerous inequality and instability. So we can't repeat the same mistakes of the movement of the past. We need to follow the leadership of Black and brown people, and it means we need to fight to repair this systemic failure to protect Black life in our country so that in the future, all communities, and not just white and affluent communities, will have the resources that they need to recover in the face of crisis. And it's really critical that progressive organizations stand together right now in that fight. We are stronger as a coalition, we're stronger together, and we know that the systems that exploit and kill Black people are the same ones that repress workers' movements, are the same ones that are intensifying the climate crisis. So we need to be fighting for solutions that are bold and intersectional, and that means right now we need to do everything we can to dismantle that systemic racism.
Thank you so much for that brilliant way of framing what we're called to do in this moment. All of us need to stand together with each other today and every day. And you can learn more at j20strike.org or by following the hashtag #Strike4FOR Black Lives.
On behalf of the 20 million members of Uni Global Union in 150 countries, I'm here to say that we are with you as you strike for Black lives. We are with you as you stand up for healthcare for all, wages with dignity, paid leave, and the ability to form a union without harassment and intimidation. We know that unions have been and will continue to be a force change in the fight against economic exploitation and racial discrimination. Systemic racism is not just an American problem, it is something we confront in all of our communities and countries. Tearing down these systems of oppression is essential in order to transform our world, to advance justice, and to expand democracy. Together, we will win. Together, we will create a world where Black lives are valued.
Hi, we are here at the Black Lives Matter protest in Munich and sending out solidarity to our colleagues from the SEIU in America. Your fight is our fight. Solidarity from Munich.
No peace!
다시 한번 해보겠습니다. No justice, no peace. 훌륭하셨습니다. 감사합니다.
Our united fight to end systemic racism and achieve true racial and economic justice will fuel and be fueled by putting more power in the hands of working people and their communities. Those striking workers in the US have called on workers across the world to send them solidarity. And that is what every single one of us on this call is doing, sending a message of solidarity from the UK. So thank you to every one of you for joining.
I want some of us to take even lower wages to bring the wages down for the rest of us. We won't have it because in rejecting racism, we reject low wages, we reject poverty, we reject the differences and discriminations among ourselves. And I think the work that you are doing, the struggle that you are waging is all our struggle. I'm just delighted with the Black Lives Movement because it has opened the way for all of us who want to fight injustice.
And that cry of "I can't breathe" on Black Lives Matter isn't just a physical cry that of Black people responding to these modern day lynchings, but it's a call that actually spans through the ages, and it's a call that connects our fight from slavery, colonialism, imperialism, to capitalism, to climate change. And it's a cry about the injustices that say that the lives of some people simply don't matter. But it's also a call for action. And I think, that call for action is something we must also focus on. A call to action that says, we do have the right to dignity and equality and the right to live free from exploitation. And it's a call for all of us to work together actively to build the society we want that's rooted in justice.
Standing beside them in support for Black Lives Matters and the strike, because I think actually people going on strike in this moment is very important symbolically, because actually often people see strikes as just something about self-interest, but they're much, much more than that.
I'm showing my son that if you want respect, you have to demand it. That's what makes me a good mum. That's why I joined the union. That's why I'm fighting for 15 in the union, because I want justice. If we want justice, we have to go and fight for it. And the best way of fighting for justice is to come together with your co-workers, form a union, and demand it. We only have strength in numbers, and we only have power together. We can only get justice when we stand together.
And our siblings in the US are leading the way. Our message for you is this. Remember, you are making history, and you may be inspiring countless others to strike and fight for Black lives in the workplace and wider society for years to come.
Do you know how it feels to be an African American parent of 2 Black males that are already deemed by the police and the criminal justice system as criminals? My twin sons have never been involved in the criminal justice system. They've attended college. They're working. They're employed in jobs that they enjoy. But because of the color of their skin, their brown and Black skin, they are deemed the enemy. They have targets on their back. Can you imagine, as a parent, every night wondering whether or not your sons are going to make it home? That is a fear and that is a concern that African American parents, as well as other minority parents, have had way before the killing of George Floyd. What America doesn't understand is that until we have economic justice, we will not have racial justice. Because a lot of these jobs that African Americans and minorities are placed in are unskilled jobs that do not have safe environments, they do not pay well, and those employees are not represented. So that is why it is important to me to be a part on July 20th, the strike for Black lives. As I've said before, we need economic justice as well as racial justice.
My name is Trayvon. I'm a checkers worker here in Tampa. I'm on strike today because I'm fighting for racial economic justice at my job, livable wages, and also PPE.
My name is Alex. I'm a checkers worker here in Tampa, and today I'm on strike because I'm standing with McDonald's workers who are in Florida that is going through discrimination on the job. See, the police beat and kill us, and Trump and the federal government, they're racist. Our jobs don't care whether we live or die as long as we make profit.
Black Lives Matter.
Toya, Augusta, and Marcos, why are you going on strike today?
I'm a nursing home worker. I've been working in a nursing home for 20 plus years. And I need better wages. I need better health care. I need the proper PPE. And I need to better thrive for my community.
How many people in your facility have gotten infected?
Far as residents, I do believe it was 26. Far as co-workers, I do believe it was 14 or 12 or 14.
And tell us what the personal protective equipment, if you had the proper equipment, what that would mean for everybody.
Safety for me, safety for my family. If we did have proper PPE, it'll make a big difference. I wouldn't have to come home worried about undressing on my porch, worried about taking them clothes off so they don't make it in my house.
Yeah.
It's just a lot we wouldn't have to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to tell you, I get goosebumps as you talk because it's so wrong that any of the 2 million nursing home workers in this country are being put in harm's way because our government and corporations have failed to provide the personal protective equipment you deserve and that every worker on the front lines of this pandemic should have.
I'm going on strike today because racial harassment, discrimination, and retaliation has to stop. Worrying about if I'm gonna eat this day or let my kids eat. I have 2 young kids and I care about them very much. And seeing things in the workplace and not being able to do much about it until now, I'm happy for that.
This is a corporation, McDonald's, that is doing advertising about how they think every Black life matters. They're giving money to groups. And I'm looking at a Black leader in their store that they could actually invest in and prove that Black lives matter. So this father is not having to choose between eating himself and his 2 children. That is just wrong.
I'm sorry, I ain't mean to laugh, but what you said was about McDonald's caring about Black people was a little funny at the time.
I know. Isn't that absurd? It is laughable. You are right to laugh. Absolutely.
One thing I've noticed in the last couple of years that labor movements and civil rights movements usually go hand in hand, and this is a perfect example of it. We need the proper PPE. I'm lucky to have it, but not everybody is lucky. Not everybody has it, and I think everybody deserves it. And that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is we need equality. It's both of those things are safety concerns, and we got to make it understood that Black lives matter.
Enough is enough, and
yeah,
having the courage to stand up and say, you know what, I'm gonna do this no matter what. Somebody got to do it, and if my coworkers are able to see me have enough courage to do it, maybe they will too in the future.
We are demanding fair compensation. We want to tell our workers of America, your lives are essential. Your lives are essential. Your lives are essential. And we're fighting for you. Put workers first by putting $200 billion in for essential workers. Every one of them gets $10 more an hour for risking their lives for us. It's the least a grateful nation can do to honor the sacrifice made by our essential workers throughout America. So when I get back to Washington, I'm getting in the car and driving down there right now. I am going to fight like hell against Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans to take up the HEROES Act and pass it.
I've been at Google for 7 years. When the protest started around George Floyd, we saw Google's response to those protests as being very tone deaf. It felt almost as if our CEO, Sundar, had never heard of racism before he had written that letter and was like, oh, wow, racism exists. We should start responding to this. And so there were a number of us who felt really upset that there weren't meaningful changes happening. And so we decided that we needed to start a petition and start trying to change things. So we started off with a petition and invited people to just join a group called Googlers Against Racism. We got over 2,000 people as of this morning to sign this petition and about 950 people to join the group. And so from there, we then found out about this strike. And so today we are doing a lot to try to really kind of demonstrate our show of force. Because we're a very digital company, going out and doing a literal strike doesn't have quite the same impact as it does in some other places. But we figured that since we're very much on digital platforms anyway, that's then how we can make our push. So we're doing a lot to try to focus on different ways that we can really get the word out and really try to push for meaningful change. We're asking Google to step up the different things that it's doing. Sundar promised that he would increase Black Google leadership from 2.6% to 3.4%. Whereas since 1997, it's been on average about 10% of software engineers are Black in America. And so really, we should be going up to more meaningful numbers based on what's actually happening in our society. We really want to see meaningful investment. And so we've been pulling people together to start strategizing and coming up with concrete items that we can do to try to really push this movement forward and make sure that even at Google, we are making sure that Black Lives Matter all through the different ranks.
The Googler engineers are making a 21st century union come to life in front of our eyes. And you are incredibly inspiring to our nursing home leaders, our fast food leaders, our janitors, the rehabilitation counselors. You are helping people understand that the new economy also needs organization and power, and you are taking it to one of the wealthiest corporations and biggest corporations in the world that we all know, and raising your voice.
It's really important to a lot of us because we see how much tech is changing the world. When we get concerned about racist police officers potentially being able to face scans of people and trying to identify people, that's coming from these big tech companies. As we are creating the software and the hardware that powers the future, we want to make sure that we are doing it in a way that is moral and that is fair for everybody in the world.
These large corporations are failing to acknowledge the systemic racism that is going on in this country, and how someone at Google can now step up and say, hey, we're tired of being passed on. These are the rights that we're looking for, and this is the plan that we want to go into action.
When you're talking about building power, there's also racial injustice at my job as well. We're expected to be at work and not only do a great job, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. I have a 1-year-old son. It's very difficult not to think about him or my other children when I have to come home and change my uniform, knowing that I wear the same uniform. We don't have the proper protective equipment, such as hand sanitizer or gloves. Like, for instance, when you go to the doctor, doctors have on face shields. They have big gloves, they have on big robes, they're protecting themselves, and it's not the same. And if that's not enough, we're also fighting for a living wage, at least $15 an hour. That's just to say the least. So as I hear people talking about large corporations saying that they stand in unity with Black lives, for me, enough talk is enough talk. It's time to show. And one starting point is to raise the minimum wage at 15.
You're right, Glenn. That's a huge way that those corporations should be fighting to raise those wages and doing better. Those airlines can more than afford to raise those wages. So thank you for linking those fights and making clear that we're not going to win economic justice without winning racial justice. And you just brought that to life. Thank you so much. Crystal, how are you uniting your organizing and fights for justice?
Yes, absolutely. So building power in community is absolutely the key to success. The National Domestic Workers Alliance is basically the home of over 2 million domestic workers in America and across other countries as well. So domestic workers, they do the most precious work, caring for families, caring for your loved ones, caring for your homes, but we don't have basic rights. And so that's why I am here, and that's why there are going to be other domestic workers on today fighting for those basic rights. Every domestic worker deserves minimum $15 an hour. we are here to help others understand that the disparities in our income from one race to another is unnecessary. There are several nannies, because I am a nanny, that has lost their jobs, but there's ones that have worked overtime and they're not getting that paid time off. They're not having access to health care. Domestic work was built on my ancestors. So as a Black nanny, as a Black domestic worker, I'm demanding that we have basic rights.
Amen, Crystal, and we stand with you in that. We want to make sure that the racist exclusion and the historic enforced slavery of African women to do domestic work ends in our generation, and that work becomes valued as making all other work possible in this nation. So thank you so much for your struggle and your fight. We stand in solidarity. Nikki, how do you build power and justice in your community?
Well, I gotta say, I'm trembling right now, especially after hearing Crystal speak for domestic workers. And after hearing you call it out, Mary Kay, like, this is the vestiges of slavery that are still holding on to our economy. So this vestige of slavery and low wages, like the federal tip minimum wage is still $2.13. Like, we need $15 plus our tips and a union so bad, like 100 years ago. Like, that's why I'm coming out. That's why my people in 5 cities, we're mobilizing to come out today. And we're educating, we're building power by educating people about this fact. I'm just grateful for each of these leaders and what they bring to the movement. And it makes me feel like we have each other's backs, right? Like, I can't do what Chewy is doing at Google, but it's so necessary. And I'm so glad that he's there. And it just feels really beautiful to, we have what we need to win. We have what we need and who we need to win.
And unity, there's strength. And we have, with this great, passionate group of leaders, we have that strength. It will proliferate throughout our communities, throughout the workplace, so that, you know, we can begin that change. And everyone has a choice. So this is what I mentioned to my guys. You have a choice to either be silent or you have a choice to speak out. What will be your choice? So my choice today is to speak out.
We're getting fed up of police brutality, of racism.
We need to eradicate systemic racism that keeps us in a cycle where we cannot succeed.
That's why on July 20th, I'm standing up.
I'm taking action on July 20th.
I will be on strike July the 20th.
Y estoy en huelga porque nos enfrentamos a un racismo sistemático día a día.
Our jobs, they don't care about us.
We are on the ground, on the front line, whether there's a pandemic or not. Corporations, McDonald's, Walmart, all the fast food chains, they're all hollering for Black Lives Matter. No, they're not. They're making billions on our back. We've got people in these places dying with COVID.
Black workers are dying at a higher rate because of COVID.
I had to fight at my job just for protective equipment.
It's been 3 months, and I finally got a mask at work.
Hands up, don't shoot! Hands up!
Black folk are getting gunned down.
I am an easy target as a black woman to get shot down in the streets by police.
Why should we have to be worried about if the cop is going to stop us, harass us, possibly kill us for no reason when we're not doing anything, we're just trying to live?
If things stay the same, where will we be 4 years from now?
And enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
We want for every person in our community to be able to walk safely and work safely and feel that this country is here for you.
Get out here, protest, keep fighting.
We're going to continue to unite until there's change. Because when we fight, we win.